Okay, so welcome everyone to Cinder PTG, and we will start with the topics. So the first topic is proposed by me, the release cadence discussion. So yesterday we had a TCPTL interaction where we discussed about the release cadence. So there is a link to the email thread by Dan Smith, which describes what changes are going to happen and not exactly what changes, but what is the plan regarding this topic. So as I understood, so there were other people as well from the senior team, and Jiman was there as well, so they can correct me if I go wrong somewhere. So I will just reiterate my understanding of it. So basically, it is a change on the upgrade path, and the release model will stay the same. That is, we will be releasing every 6 months. But with the upgrade path, there are proposed certain changes. So they are proposing a tick-tock release model where a particular release will be named as tick and the subsequent release will be tock, and the same pattern goes on. As far as I understand, the first tick release will be double A. So from there we can start seeing this pattern. So the idea is basically to be able to upgrade from a tick release to a tick release. That is to upgrade uh, like in a 1 year duration. So people don't have to upgrade frequently. So we are providing this support for that. And the talk to talk upgrade is not possible, and they can upgrade from a talk to a tick release and then again to a talk release. So that is similar to the rolling upgrade we already had. So basically that's the idea. We have a grenade job in place. So that is, I think, called grenade skip level, which will be testing this. So it will be upgrading from an N-2 release to an N release. That, as I said, will be a tick to a tick release. So we will be checking that, and it will, if I understand correctly, it will only run on the tick releases. That is, it starts with double A and then will run on double C and will not run on Z or double B. So also Goika has a patch up for some documentation regarding databases, like database when we drop a table, so we don't drop a table in a top release. And I think he also has some documentation around it why we don't do that, just to support this use case, which I already mentioned. Yeah, I think that was all from my side, and anyone can add any points to it.
Yeah, I don't know if I will be heard because I've fallen with blue jeans 2 or 3 times already. But fortunately for the Cinder project, this new tick to tick upgrade path is going to be trivial. We only have to be careful when we contract our database. In other words, when we remove columns. That's the only change that we have to be careful. We can only drop columns on a tock release. That's it. That's the only thing we have to be careful about. We don't drop columns on tick, and we're fine. At least according to my analysis, which could be wrong, but yeah.
Am I
That's
to
true.
hear this correctly that we cannot upgrade to a tick release unless you're already on a tick release?
No, so
No.
if I understand correctly, we can do a rolling upgrade from a top to a tick or a tick top tick release, but that's a new upgrade path we are supporting from a tick to a tick, skipping one release.
So
Okay,
Walter,
so
basically, we can still do n to n plus 1, then n plus 1 to n plus 2. We can do the normal path, but we have an additional path because right now you cannot upgrade and jump, skip any release because of the rolling upgrade feature. You have to go through each of the codes and run the database schema migration, the online data migration, then jump to the next and do the same thing. Even if when you're doing it offline, we have to do that for every single release. The new approach is, yeah, that will still work, but now we have a new way of upgrading for people that just want to upgrade once a year. And that is, we will also support tick to tick. So let's say only even releases can be upgraded, skipping one.
Okay, so my experience with this, since I manage and deploy a lot of Cinder deployments, it's incredibly painful, as everybody might understand, to do upgrades. And even more so for me because we have a lot of patches in Cinder that aren't going to be put upstream and won't because they're very specific to our deployment model. And anyway, so typically what we do is we have to do major upgrades from like the last one I did was Queens to Train, and I did that directly from Queens directly to Train, and the database migration script all worked, and it's working just fine. And my next plan is to upgrade from Train to Wallaby. Um, so this idea of doing a n only to n+1 release is really it's impossible for me, basically, because of all of the patches that I have in Cinder that I won't upgrade to, won't push upstream, and that's my problem.
But Walter, the thing is, sorry to interrupt you, but this
Yeah,
is what we have today. We only support n to n+1. That's today, and that's been for a couple of years now. So that will not change.
right. But I'm saying that
So
I've actually done upgrades, skipped upgrades, and it works just fine.
yeah,
Yeah.
but that's luck. Because what happens is that we tend to forget to remove the online data migrations. And we haven't dropped a single column for a very, very long time. But you may not have been lucky if you had done that in between any other releases. So
Right.
the thing is that there were multiple options. We could have just kept the online data migrations forever, change a bit the installers and things like that. But we are going with on a different direction.
Okay, so this
Yeah.
really isn't a change with respect to
Yeah, the
What we
only
have.
only
the
thing it will
upgrade
be
path.
like at upstream, we will be tested that. So currently it work, may not work. But from now onwards, we will be tested it and we will be confirming yes, it will work. So that's the main
Right.
main goal of this one.
So we're going to have to add a new CI, or someone's going to add a new CI to test doing the upgrades from N to N+1 to make sure that tick to tock
Exactly.
works and tock to tick works and all that. I wish they would have chose a different name. That this TikTok thing is really annoying. Confusing.
Yeah.
I agree.
But you're
Yeah.
right, like we will be adding all the CI and upgrade testing with whatever like we will be committing from upstream with this model.
Okay.
Yeah. And in
All
and
right.
in
All
addition
this
to
kind of
what
worries me and creates a lot of confusion. Really, is what I see this doing. I'm not sure how this is really helping OpenStack in general, but that's a totally different question. I just want to understand what our responsibility with respect to Cinder is to supporting this.
and other point like other than the database thing, the deprecation and removal is also another key thing. So uh, we should not remove anything in the tock release because that anyone is doing from tick to tick upgrade, they will not see the deprecation and removal if that is happening within the tock release. So if say for example I'm deprecating one feature in tick 1 and in tock next tock I should not remove that. Instead I should just inform the same deprecation warning or release notes in the tock release also. And in next tick then I can remove it so that people upgrading from tick to tick get the notification about deprecation warning, deprecation release notes, and they can have the upgrade path smoothly. That is one
So
of
that's
the
with
things.
respect to database column removals, but what about other things that we remove from Cinder, such as drivers and other
Yeah, I think
features?
same thing everyone, API or driver or any change. Like removal, we should avoid from tock release to do.
There might be possibility that we have to do it because of if feature goes, or if something has to go, then there are some configuration thing, or there are few of other things may have to go with those. But overall, we should avoid any removal which can affect operator or users in the tock release.
Okay, so this is impacting Cinder and what we can remove and when then. So we can only remove things once a year then, in this case.
Yeah, because two path we have to support, tick to tock upgrade also and tick to tick upgrade also. So anything happening, removal or anything is happening in tock release, the people upgrading from tick to tick will not get notification.
Okay.
How we are going to enforce this in a patch set that are incoming? Just based on our knowledge, the core reviewers have to know that we can't merge things that remove stuff in tick version.
Yeah, so we have updated the deprecation guide also. I will link that thing. So there we have updated how we should deprecate and remove the things in this model. So, but yeah, it will be as per our knowledge base. Usually we doing it in current state also. We have to deprecate first, and then after 6 months or whatever, we have to remove that. So we don't just remove, deprecate, and remove within the cycle. So same way, every project core team have the knowledge of these deprecation and removal thing, and they make sure it is being followed.
Okay.
So I'm wondering about the removal only in ticks. So if we have a configuration option, if we removed it, so we announce it in tick, this is deprecated. You won't be able to use it in your next upgrade. We remove it in tock, then it's also gone when they do the upgrade to their next tick. So it seems like you could go ahead and remove it during tock, or am I misunderstanding?
So if you are deprecating in tick, yeah.
I thought we were only allowed to remove it in tick, not in tock.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I thought there was I wonder. So there's two ways of looking at this. There could be a legalistic reason we just commit only to removing stuff in ticks, or there could be a technical reason why you can't remove stuff in tocks. I guess that's what I'm wondering is it seems like you could remove something in tock because if you're saying as long as you announce it in tick, everybody knows when I upgrade I won't be able to use this anymore. So if we removed it in tock, then it would also be gone when you got to the next tick release. I guess I'm thinking of configuration options. Maybe that's too simplistic.
No, I think that's really good. My understanding is that we could only remove things in tock. That's why this crap is so confusing, really. And this is making things so much more complicated for Cinder. But is this a policy issue with respect to the release cycles? And if so, then this needs to be clearly laid out for us so that way, as a core reviewer, if I'm reviewing a patch and they're removing a feature or like you said, a configuration option, because that's definitely possible for drivers specifically, that I need to -1 or -2 that patch because this is a tock release that we're doing or a tick release that we're doing, whichever the policy is supposed to lay out for us. And I think there's a lot of confusion with respect to that. I'm not clear on it.
Yeah. So only thing in this is whatever the current upgrade path is, what change it will be in that is you will get a extra 6-month notice of deprecation or not removing the things, which is a extra thing for upgrade, right? So we are not changing anything in the existing upgrade which can break you.
Okay,
so we can't
you're
remove
saying
things during talk.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. If, for example, if I am in AA, I'm deprecating the things. BB, which AA is the tick release, BB is the tock release. So what I do, I just add or copy paste or link the same deprecation warning or deprecation release notes in the tock release also. Then in CC, which is tick 2, I remove the things. So people upgrading from AA to BB, there is no change. They still have the things. People upgrading from AA to CC, they notice, okay, there was a upgrade warning, deprecation warning, and in CC, things is removed. So I updated my the things, whatever I need to do. So if you are upgrading from AA to CC, CC to BE, there is no breaking change in that. Only thing is you get the extra window of deprecated things, so that you get extra time to take care of those deprecation things or removal.
Yeah, I think it basically gets resolved if you give a 2-cycle deprecation period. Because if you do it from tick to tick, it's fine. You deprecate in tick, in tock, it's still deprecated, and you remove it again in the next tick. That means that everybody has had at least one release to make the changes. If you're doing from you deprecate on tock, then the tock already knows that it's deprecated when upgrades to tick. And tick to tick also knows that it's deprecated, and it doesn't get removed until the next tock. So but then again, I agree with Walter. We have to. I have added to the Etherpad so that I can update my patch, spell this out, so that we are all aware. As in, now the deprecation process needs to be 2 cycles. You cannot just deprecate on the next cycle. You need to wait for 2.
Yes.
And like you were saying, we need to include it in the release notes in 2 cycles as well.
Yeah,
Which
just
that
to notify.
is something new.
Yeah, just notify, like if I am doing tick to tick, so tick 1 having some release note. So if I'm doing tick to tock, so I also get the, okay, something has been deprecated there. So doing those things in 2 cycle will be an extra notification to operator and users. So it can be just a link to those release notes or something, like, which can be a minimal effort to notify.
And can we get them to change this to LTS instead of this TikTok nonsense?
Yeah, we actually discussed all these things. So idea here was, and the background for this was, how should we support the 1 year upgrade in OpenStack? Should we make the release cycle of 1 year now instead of 6 months? Then after all this discussion with all those option LTS and all those, we came up with, like, let's continue to support the existing model of 6-month cycle, 6-month upgrade, but we'll be giving an extra support of 1 year upgrade from tick to tick release with the perform testing at upstream.
So LTS makes sense instead of tick.
Well, you mean just a name thing, or?
Yeah, the naming thing is
yeah. The only problem
so
with that was
confusing.
Yeah, the only problem with that was the tock release should not be considered as like non-upgradable or something like, right? So with LTS, it may convey, okay, these are the LTS, these in between tock release are just intermediate and not stable. So that's what we want to remove. But yeah, naming thing, yeah, it may be confusing. So we can bring it in the TC session and let's see if something good name we can come up. TikTok is always confusing, even in explaining the things. So, and to Brian, question, like you said, if we deprecate thing in tick 1, immediate tock release we can remove. So if we go with the basic deprecation policies, what we do, or we used to do, is we deprecate things in 1 cycle and we remove the things in next cycle, right? So for people upgrading from tick to tick, it will be, we deprecated the things in tick, But in between, we remove the things, even though there is no new tick release. So people upgrading from master, using the master tick, or they are using the released version of tick, for them it can matter, right? So just following the policy, like deprecating the things in one cycle where people are using, and removing the things in next cycle where they will be upgrading to. So for tick to tick is tick 1 and tick 2.
Okay, I guess what I'm missing is if I'm going from tick to tock, right? It's deprecated in tick, we remove it in tock. I already knew it was going to go. I'm fine. Now, if I'm going tick to tick, right? I know it's going to be gone in tick 2. So if it had already been removed in tock, that's not going to bother me, right?
Yeah, if you are upgrading the released version, so you get the enough window. But say, for example, if you're using master, if you are deprecating things in the end of the tick release, say for example in this case in March, and tock release start in April, so you just remove the tock thing in April. So it's just within 1 or 2 months you have deprecated and you have removed the things. So to give that window, if someone is using the master code, we make sure like we give the full 6-month or 12-month cycle to remove it. If you are using just the released version, I agree with you. It will not make much difference. But if someone is using master, for them we have to provide some window in terms of time so that they notice the deprecation things. For example, in current existing deprecation policies also, we have to have the window of, I think, 3 months. We cannot remove things at the end of the cycle and immediately deprecate things in end of the cycle and immediately remove the things at the next start of the cycle. So the same thing, we have extended that window of 3 months to 6 months at least. So that use case only. Otherwise, if you are using released version, then it's same thing, right? As you mentioned.
All right, so to make it easier on reviewing and developing, though, we might as well just say it's always going to be 2 releases. That,
yes.
Okay.
12-month window of doing the thing.
Right?
Pardon?
Isn't that exactly what we do now?
Yeah, so now we are having a 1 cycle window, 6 months. So with this model, we will be extending it to the 12-month 2 cycle window to remove anything. So for
this is really confusing because I've heard multiple conflicting scenarios, right? Brian brought up the scenario of tick being deprecated, removing it in tock. That's not a 1-year cycle. That's barely.
Yeah, that's why I'm saying like we'll not remove in tock. So deprecating things in tick, removing things in tick.
So we release tick, it's deprecated, it stays in tock, we release tock, and then the next cycle for tick 2 is when it gets removed.
Yes, that's it.
Okay. All right, that's where the confusion was coming from for me.
Yeah, because if we remove things in tock, the same confusion will come. Like people will get not notified if they are using master code. It will be very hard for them.
Yes.
Yeah, so overall, what we are just extending the removal window from 1 cycle to 2 cycle. So the people
now
doing
everybody will know, right? So even people using master, right? They know if something was deprecated in tick, when tick 2 development opens, that thing might disappear.
Yes.
Right, even though it's realer because it's been at least 6 months. Okay.
6 months. Yeah.
So in case of a talk, like when we are deprecating something in talk, I guess we can remove it in the next tick release because from a talk we can only upgrade to a tick.
No, no, we cannot. Because if you, let's say you have tick one, like what Walter is saying, then talk and tick two. If you deprecating talk, the ones that were only on tick one don't know about that deprecation. That's
Yeah, their
what you need
future
a
just
full year.
disappears
Because, yeah.
Okay, so we are
without
following
any
the 1 year.
deprecation.
Yeah.
So I think the summary that was given is probably the best. Like 1 year deprecation period. You don't have to explain about TikTok. We just have to say 1 year, and the notification of deprecations have to go in both cycles.
Yeah,
And that's it.
that's easy. 1 year deprecation period and easy to understand and easy to follow up the policy.
Okay. So that's for config options and database columns, I presume. But what about drivers? We add and remove drivers all the time. And we have a concept within Cinder of unsupported versus deprecated. It has a totally different meaning. I guess we need to decide what all this means with respect to that as well. If anything, maybe there's no change.
But do we have for Cinder backend drivers the unsupported feature or only for the zone manager?
We have a flag where we mark a driver as unsupported, meaning we've recognized that the driver hasn't been supported by the upstream vendor, but we still kind of want it around for whatever reason. We don't want to remove it because it's probably still working, and it's not causing us any problems with respect to our CI breaking anything else. So we have in the past marked drivers as unsupported, and what that actually means at deployment time is that you can deploy an unsupported driver, but it won't start. The volume manager won't start that driver unless you specifically add a new config option for that driver to say, hey, I recognize that this is not supported, but start it anyway. And then, and only then, will the volume manager actually start that driver up. So it's different than deprecated, but we are still leaving it around, so it's kind of deprecated. But
I think
if that
it makes
makes
sense to say we can only remove a driver on a tick, but that we can mark it unsupported anytime we want to, because your current config file won't work, but that's intentional because we want to draw your attention to this. And then once you make that one little change, everything's cool. Does that sound okay to people?
Yeah, I agree with that.
Wait, you said you can mark it whenever you want as unsupported, but then we go back to people not knowing that it's going unsupported if it goes on the doc release. Because on the next tick, I don't see it as unsupported. I go to the next, I'm on tick 1, I go to read the tick 2 release notes, and they don't say that it has gone be unsupported.
Well, we would just, as long as the notes said that, right? Because like currently...
But it was said on talk, not on the tick 2.
Right, we would just have to
So
remember.
we have to copy. We have to copy, like with the deprecation, you have to duplicate the release notes so that somebody that goes from tick to tick can see that their driver is now unsupported. Yep.
Right, okay.
And removal has to stay until the next tick release is released.
But isn't this basically the same thing as with the features? Just stay for 1 year, duplicate the release note, and that's it. We don't. It's not different, I think.
I think the
Yeah.
only difference in my mind is that when you deprecate something, you absolutely have a plan to get rid of it at some point. Unsupported is not necessarily following that. You can leave something unsupported in as long as we can tolerate it, until it starts actually breaking CI, then we actually remove it. So
But in the past, we have reinstated drivers that went without removing. They went into deprecated, they fixed everything, and we just changed the flag immediately without removal. So it's an intent, but doesn't have to go through in the case of drivers, right?
yeah. I think we've done that with unsupported as well. Same thing. So I think the consensus right now is that we just follow the same model as deprecated in terms of when we can remove it, if we actually want to remove it.
Right.
Yeah, and just notify everything twice.
Yeah.
Deprecation, we notify it twice. Unsupported, twice. Removal,
Let's see what
we have to notify as well twice.
with unsupported, it might get unsupported and then resupported before the next
Well,
tick.
in that case, it's
And then we don't
fine.
say anything.
It's
Yeah.
exactly.
So we just have to, all right, we just have to pay attention. So our idea is that as far as the drivers go, we can mark them unsupported at any point, as long as we make sure tick to tick people will know about it in the release notes, if appropriate. And then as far as removing code, we'll stick with the overall strategy of only remove on the next tick after a
No, we can remove all.
tick.
We just need to, we can remove as long as it has been deprecated for a year. And you can remove on tock or on tick. You just have to notify it twice on the release notes. So everything has to be notified twice. You change it to deprecated, notify it twice in 2 releases, and then you can remove it on the next one. So just stretch everything you would do on 1, do it in 2, but it doesn't matter if it's tick or tock, you don't care.
Yeah, the simple is just notify twice and wait for 12.
I guess the key thing here is as long as Rajat is clear on all this, then we're in good shape.
I'll update the patch with everything we're discussing, and I think we can continue looking at it. I'll try to update it tomorrow, so maybe we can have a second read tomorrow first thing or something like that, because that would give us time, if we have more questions, to go on Thursday to the meeting and ask those questions, right?
Yeah, that's a really good idea.
Yeah, that sounds good. And I think the TC team is also going to have a session on Thursday. So if anyone is interested, they can ask their questions there as well.
Yeah, that was sorry, I the context was in my head. When I said on Thursday, go with the questions, I meant to the TC meeting. Yeah, sorry. Thanks, Ryan, for the clarification.
Yeah, no problems. So I guess everyone is clear on the basic idea of it. It still is in its initial phase, so we will be going to have a lot of discussions around creating a concrete idea about this. So I will follow along with the TC updates and will update the team in Cinder meetings about this. For now, I don't think there is any action item for our team apart from Gorka updating the patch with the necessary documentation.
Just another extra thing we'll be discussing in TC is about like defined. Am I audible? Okay, because I'm using Zoom and this in parallel. So other thing in TC will be discussing about our defined testing runtime, because currently if there is a Python version changed, we switch it immediately, right? So in tick to talk model, we have to extend that Python version testing for another, say, 12 months, even though we are switching it to the new one. So that kind of things is also a extra thing we will be discussing in TC, and how we can support this testing for this extended upgrade.
I don't mean to extend this discussion further, but one thing that comes to mind with respect to this is backporting patches and how that is
So
affected.
backporting is same. It has to go from one cycle to another cycle. It cannot skip the stable branch. So if, say, for example, anything, I'm in the tick 2, I have to backport to tick 1. It has to go from top, then tick 1. Previous top, previous tick 1. So same way, like cycle by cycle.
And no removals and
Removal, we don't backport, I think, currently also.
yeah.
Yeah, so no change in that policy. So stable policies, everything stays same. There's like no change in backporting steps or backporting policies. Yeah, but yeah, we'll be discussing this testing runtime, and if anything, like more documentation. Definitely, we need more documentation on this, then how we can explain it in a better way for operator and users to understand, like to make projects developers to understand is one thing, but to explain it to for operator and user in terms of upgrade is also the key thing. So feel free to join the TC one and give us feedback, like how much documentation or any other things we should do this to explain it better and to migrate it better. That's why, like, AA is the first cycle, first tick we are thinking, so that we have the Zed cycle to figure out all these stuff.
And to rename it.
Yeah, definitely I'll add that name thing in TC note.
So I guess this discussion was productive. We came up with a lot of points that I guess Luca is going to update in his patch, so everyone is aware about the things that we discussed today. Okay, so I have marked that as an action item, and I think we can proceed with the next topic. So there is a feature in BlueJeans with the star on the left hand side. Gorka proposed that we can make a spotlight out of every topic. Like after every topic, we can make a spotlight, so it's easier to follow, like when the next topic starts. So if anyone can press the button, maybe Gorka, you can press it and.
Nope, it disappeared when I started using Firefox. It was in Chrome, now it's not. So I don't know if anybody's Chrome and sees a star button, like a roundy thingy in the middle.
Yep, I just hit it.
Thank you.
Yeah,
It's in the app.
Okay, so we can move on to the next topic, and that's again by me. This is going to be a short one, and so Brian started out this thing, which is not yet official, but whenever someone asks for reviews, then they can do reviews first. So, like we already know, we are always short on reviews every cycle. So it was a good thing, good initiative. And I just wanted to move it further. So like the new contributors which are reviewing, they don't have clear idea about which things to go first. Like should we look at the commit message? Should we look at the code or at the gate jobs? So I am putting together a review document which will mention all the points that that will incorporate like what all things I look for in a review, and people can review it and add their ideas as well. So I'm just making it a very Cinder specific documentation. It will contain information about the third party CI jobs, and the RPC database migrations and everything. So I will, it's still in work in progress. I just wanted to bring it out. Like this will be very helpful for the new reviewers. They will have ease reviewing packet patches. Like they will have a checklist, which all items we can go through and review. So it will lessen the burden on other people and like make our patches merge faster.
I think we should also include probably in there what we did, a common topic, which is you don't have to say, it's good if you say what you have reviewed and you don't have to review everything. If you don't know about a specific part, you may not review it as a new reviewer. Just say, okay, I have tested this code. At least it seems to work. I have not reviewed the unit test. I have not whatever. Yep. I think that also helps people because it's the blind plus one are always, you never know if they have actually reviewed anything or they are just blindly saying, yeah, whatever, plus one. Yep. Thanks for the effort. And we can add what we just discussed to this document. They make sure that you don't remove something, that the deprecation stays, stuff like that. Yep. That's like a good
Yeah.
idea.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I will keep in mind to add it to the discussion. So again, like one more thing I want to ask, like I was trying out this like saying and writing at the same time, and I think it's hard for me as it was for Brian. So if anyone would like to volunteer to write down the uh, things, I will try to make sure like if I can how much I can like cover up. But if anyone would like to do it, then uh, it would be great for me.
You know, we could even have like a note taker for each session, so somebody's not stuck doing it the whole time. But yeah, I think it's good as long as it's clear somebody's taking notes. That's helpful.
Yeah, we can rotate like for a particular topic. Like if someone is the author, then they can't take notes, obviously. So we can that sort of thing. Okay. Yeah. So okay, I think that's all from my side in this topic, and no one has any doubts regarding this. Then we can move on to the next topic. So can someone press the button again? Like I don't have the blue
Yep,
jeans updated, so I'm not able to say it.
I got it.
Okay,
Thanks, Jay.
thanks again.
Oh
So
yeah, one thing, probably everybody's noticed this, but if you have any questions, you can just write them into the Etherpad. So like Pete was saying earlier, sometimes you can't hear and it's hard to know what people are saying. So if you have any questions, just go ahead and write them in there. So everybody can take notes in here, so feel free to write.
Yeah,
Sorry, Prashant.
and everybody should feel free to interrupt the conversation if they are not hearing right for whatever reason. Because if nobody says anything about somebody having a problem with the microphone, then it's like having it muted. Pretty useless.
yeah, so yeah, everyone can write down their concerns, and people are constantly looking at the Etherpad, so they can provide your answers on the Etherpad only, or we can discuss that question here again. So yeah, that's uh, great. So okay, so let's start with the next topic. I will just update the OpenFi events. And so there is this section of the courtesy ping, which I got inspiration from Nova to do it. And I already see two names added to it. I'm not sure if Jivan is still around, but I will give him a ping uh, in the Cinder channel. Okay, so I guess we can start with the secure RBAC topic. Brian?
Okay. What I did was I posted a patch with the changes so that we can just look at them and see what we're doing for secure RBAC. So if you open that link on page 117, line 117 in the Etherpad, guess, should I share it? I don't know if I share it, I don't know if everybody's going to be able to see it. What's the best thing to do here? So I guess I'll share it.
Brian, can you give a few words about what is RBAC?
Okay, so the basic idea is that OpenStack services have had policies for a long time, but they're really hard to configure. So what we want to do is have role-based access control, which we've had a long time. But in addition to that, we want to come up with a set of personas that give you an idea of what different types of users can do with respect to the API calls. And the idea is that they'll use the roles, but by default, you'll have a bunch of stuff already configured out of the box. And the idea is that this will be more secure than doing it yourself because the policies are really, really flexible, but also really, really difficult to be sure that you've defined them correctly unless you do exhaustive testing. So the idea is that we're going to come up with a set of roles and that all the projects will use these. And then out of the box, operators will have a useful set of user profiles that they can assign to people without worrying about whether they actually work or not, because we're also doing all the testing on those. And then they still have the flexibility of extending them or changing them or doing whatever they want. But then that's up to them. Does that help, Vival?
Yes, okay, thank you. Yes.
Okay. All right, let me share, and if this doesn't work, we'll try something else. So I guess my first question is, is that visible, or I guess what I would recommend is, okay, I'd recommend open it on your own and just scroll through it. Okay, so, all right, first change. So one thing that happened in Yoga is that I had a lot of plans that we didn't get done. But the one thing we did get done was Alan Bishop implemented the making the project ID optional in the URL. And that will be handy because the system scope tokens don't have any project associated with them. So we'll be able to handle that stuff in Zed without having to worry about it. Okay. So what we have to do in Zed is we've got to update the permissions matrix document. So I talked about that, I think, at the last Cinder meeting. So what's happened in that document is we've expanded the personas that are implemented. So in Xena, we did 3 or 4, I forget. And so in Zed, we're going to do more. So in particular, we're going to do system scope personas. And the difference between the system scope personas and the project ones is that projects, in order to manipulate resources that are associated with a particular project, you have to be a member of that, well, not a member. You have to be added to that project. So as an administrator, the project administrator is going to be the person who can manipulate snapshots or migrate volumes or do stuff that administrators need to do, but ordinary users are not allowed to do. We're also going to have system type personas, and the system personas will be people that can act on the system itself. So that can add Cinder services or, make the cluster call that disables a cluster, that kind of thing. And the idea is just we want to keep separate the people who have to maintain the system from the people who monkey around with individual users' resources. So that's the basic idea. So in Zed, we'll implement the system admin. So it'll just be the administrator who can make all the system API calls. And then the other thing in Zed is that the project admin persona is, we've settled on that being an administrator, a representative of the operator, not a regular user. So we'll implement for that. The project member and project reader are going to be unchanged because they're basically just doing project type stuff. And then there'll be some multiple scoped actions. So for instance, listing volume types. So the system admin will create volume types, but anybody in a project has to be able to list them because you got to see what they are in order to know which ones you can use. So there are going to be some kind of mixed things. Okay. And then there's a slight complication about listing all the resources, like all the volumes in the deployment. But that's written down here. So the basic idea is a project admin is going to be able to list it for everyone in the deployment, even if the project admin is not actually an admin for those projects. But that was decided to be acceptable, the last I heard from the TC. Okay, so the main thing is we're going to define those personas, and then we've got to implement them. The other thing we're going to do is implement the project manager persona. So this is going to be a person in a project who's got a little bit more abilities than your normal user. And in particular for Cinder, the only thing they're going to be allowed to do is to set the default volume type for a project. So we have this API that Rajat added maybe 2 cycles ago, or 3, it's been a blur. But anyway, you can set the default volume type for a project. And so it seems like somebody in that project should be able to do that without having to call the administrator. So that's the only action that would be available for that. In order to do that, we need Keystone to actually implement the manager role. And so the spec to do that was approved, but it hasn't actually been implemented yet. So we need to push that. And then the other thing is, I'm sorry, I'm slightly disorganized here. The community goal is divided into 3 phases. Phase 2 is the project manager and then also recognizing a service role. And you can't go on to phase 3 unless you've done phase 1 and phase 2. So the service role business, the idea is that currently, in order for services to interact with other services, in some cases, you want the service to be able to do something you don't want an ordinary user to do. And in order to make that happen, currently, the services have admin credentials on another service. Now, that's kind of overkill because that currently gives them the ability to do anything to that other service, whereas they really just need to make a few particular calls that we don't want ordinary users to make. So the way to get around that is introducing the service role. And then the idea is that we can have a service, the user for Cinder will have a service role, and then that could be recognized by Nova, say, and vice versa. And then that way, the Cinder user doesn't need to have all the powers to do everything in Nova. They can just have the powers to do whatever Nova decides services should be able to do. And same thing for us. So that one's kind of stalled as far as I can tell because the spec hasn't been approved for that in Keystone, so I don't know what the timeline is. But I believe we're okay because any of those actions we need to also allow a regular admin to do, because sometimes you're going to require admin intervention to do some particular thing. So the things that services are going to be able to do will be service or admin. So I think we're okay in going ahead and implementing it, as long as there's an agreement. So this is where the spec is important, but the implementation's not, I think. So as long as we know what the service role is going to be called, we can write policies that would recognize it, even if there is no service role, and services continue to use administrative credentials as they do now. But anyway, so that's my plan. So that'll get us through phase 1 and phase 2 of the goal, and then that'll put us in a position to do phase 3 in AA. Now, what phase 3 is to finish. So we're only going to do the system admin persona. There's also a system member and a system reader. We can't allow a system reader until system scope is turned on completely. So right now there's an option in Oslo where enforce scope can be false, and I believe that's the default right now. And if that's on, then if enforce scope is off, then we have problems. So if we've completed phases 1 and 2, we can ship in AA with enforce scope equals true. And then when scope is enforced by default, we can have a system reader and a system member. But that would be the AA thing. So that's the sort of forward-looking thing. Are there any questions about the basic idea here? So if we scroll down to, I'm not doing this. Sorry, I thought I'd updated the work items, but maybe it didn't. But basically, what we've got to do is update the permissions document, right? So that's up for review. And I did put up that Etherpad to try to break that up. So I'll have to fill in the thing. And then, yeah, so basically we've got to update the policy. So, no, the first thing we had to do is remove the deprecated. I'm sorry, I lost my place. Basically, so what we got to do in this Zed cycle is we got to update the matrix so we know what we're talking about, just in terms of what the personas can do. Then we've got a bunch of policies that were deprecated in Xena. We need to go ahead and get rid of them, and Alan has some patches up for that, just to clean them out of there, because we'll be deprecating new stuff coming up. Then we've got to update the check strings and introduce the scope types to the default rules. And we've got to add all the tests to make sure that stuff is working correctly. And that's it. Right. So,
yeah, just to summarize, so we will be dealing with the phase 2 part of the community goal in this cycle, the Z release, where we are going to remove the deprecated things we did back in Xena that got carry forwarded to Yoga as well. And we also have dependency on the Keystone side regarding the manager and the service role. So I haven't been I don't have an update regarding that. If I can see Jiman has joined, if he can provide some insights on what is the plan for the project manager and the service role.
Yeah. Okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so we are a little late on Keystone side service role and manager role because of Lance shifting his role from OpenStack. So for manager role, current status is spec is merged in Keystone. Service role spec is not merged, under discussion. So after 30 minutes from now at 15 UTC, I think, In Keystone session, we are going to discuss what's the plan and who can implement it. So yeah, that's a little late. But other than this service role and manager role, I think the phase one and phase one also has like a lot of update to do, like isolating the system as well as the project thing. I think that's what Brian mentioned. And let's see how soon we can complete those manager and service role in Keystone. If that is not done in Zed cycle, then we have to a little bit shift that phase two towards AA or something. That's the
Yeah, I guess maybe this isn't the right place to discuss this, but I think if there's a problem getting the manager and the service done, I think we should just swap phase 2 and phase 3, because I think they're conceptually independent. And
phase 3, if I remember, it's the system reader, right?
Right. So that's you've got to be able to ship with enforced scope equals true in order to have the system reader. So I think if there's a problem, if there's a holdup with the manager or the service roles, then we should just swap those. We shouldn't make phase 2 be a blocker for completing phase 3. We just have to redo the goal. I mean, we want to include those things in the goal, but I think switch the time. So, because I think it's going to be really important to be able to, right? Because once we hit AA, that's a tick.
The only problem in that will be if, say, for example, in Cinder, you are making enforce scope as a default to true in Zed cycle. Then only you can do the system reader, right?
Well, as long as, well, I guess that's a question then.
Yeah. So what path we followed in Nova is in Yoga cycle we implemented everything, phase 1, and we said operator can turn on the enforce scope by switching that flag. In Zed cycle, which we'll be discussing tomorrow in Nova, can we make it default? Scope enforce, can we make it default or not? If yes, then along with that we can make the system reader things. Right.
Okay.
So in Cinder,
I wasn't clear. So in Cinder, what we want to do is in the cycle we're doing right now, ship with enforced scope false.
Yeah.
But have everything done to the point where in the next cycle we can change the default to true. And then in the same cycle that we make the default true, we would also implement the system reader.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Just like Nova. Okay. So
you need the one cycle between. Yeah, because you need one cycle between asking operator, okay, this functionality is there, but it is disabled by default. You can try it.
And that would be Z. Right.
Yeah. And next cycle we are turning it on by default, and that's the time where system reader we can implement.
Right. So just to be clear, so the plan is in AA, we'll make enforce scope true, and we will also implement the system reader, so that if you install the AA release, you'll have the system reader available to you at the same time that the enforce scope is false.
Enforce scope is true by default, you mean?
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Oh man, right.
So yeah, I got it. I think I got your plan. Yeah. So
right.
In AA cycle, we'll make scope enforcement true by default, and system reader also we can ship it together with that.
Right. Okay.
And we have to tell them as a like warning or something that because there is this flag, you can still disable the enforce scope. If you do that, the system reader can be accessed by the project reader. So that's the
It's
risk.
very dangerous, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And in that plan, I agree with you. If, say, for example, service role or manager roles are not implemented in Z cycle also, so then we can switch phase 3 with phase 2. That will make
Okay.
sense. That was our
All right.
initial idea in goal, right? If you remember.
I thought so, yeah, but for some
And we
reason
switched it back because we thought service role are more important, but it has a dependency now. So let's see how it goes. But I agree
okay.
with you. We can switch it with each other
Okay.
if no dependency resolution.
Okay. All right, so that's basically what's happening with secure RBAC for Cinder. Any questions or comments or?
A question, Brian.
Sure.
So with respect to the different security levels with respect to users, there's one thing that Cinder has right now that limits the columns and fields that you can search by and when using the Cinder client. Those are the resource filters. And currently it's a one-size-fits-all right now. So even as an admin, if I don't have, say, for example, I want to find all my volumes based upon a certain host string, I can't do that right now if that's disabled in the resource filters because we don't want to allow that for end users. So are we going to implement some sort of tiered resource filtering based upon the users like we're doing with policy as well? Because that would be really, really what seems almost required, right? Because as a system root user, I should be able to search and find all of my volumes based upon the host entry because I have access to everything in the database anyway. But right now, I can't do that. But I should be able to. But as a project admin, I shouldn't be able to do that. Or maybe I should. I don't know. I guess my question is resource filtering a part of this as well?
So the short answer is I hadn't even thought about that. So,
That would be
so
a new
no.
feature, right? But I
Sorry?
mean, that would be a new feature because it
Yeah.
would be an improvement of an existing feature, which is okay. Now that we have the secure back and everything, we can leverage in some of the existing features, right? And that one, like Walter says, makes all the sense in the world. Now that we can
Yeah.
check the role, it's like, yep, now, even if you're just, whenever everything is implemented, as a system reader, well, or as an admin reader,
So,
however you want to
Right.
call it, you should be able to check the volumes on a specific host. Yep. I like that idea of being able to do different filtering depending on who you are.
Yes, I've had to write extra tooling to actually do these searches, extra Python apps and scripts to do these kinds of searches because we have to limit some of these search fields because we don't have this RBAC stuff in place, and so it applies to everybody. So we have to always resort to the lowest common denominator. And internally inside the API in Cinder, it does some checks whether you're an admin or not, but that's not sufficient in a lot of the cases that I have to use to manage my Cinder deployments. So I've had to write extra tooling to overcome some of these things.
yeah, so
Yeah.
similar use case we had in Noah, and I think that's the use case which led us changing the direction in yoga cycle. So idea here is if the resource is project level resource, system scope users should not be able to operate them or list them. So how we solve that? And if you say like host is a system level information, so project doesn't know about that. So how we solve that that use case in Noah is, I think no, I have to implement that blueprint. But the agreement for that use case in Noah is the use case is create the server on specific host. So project can create the server, but they cannot list the host, because host is system level thing. And system has the host information, but they cannot create the server because server is project level thing. So what we are allowing is, we are allowing project admin to list the host UUID, and project admin get the host UID, use that to create the server on that specific host. And it
Yeah,
will be
so
just
the
a
host
host
entry for
UID.
Cinder is a little bit different. I'm sorry to interrupt. A host entry is an attribute of a volume. And we don't expose that attribute of a volume to certain users. It's not a separate entity within Cinder that a system
I
user
see.
operates on or doesn't operate on. It's an attribute of volumes themselves.
Okay, so there is no
Um,
list
and
host thing in
yes,
Cinder, right?
yes. So when I have to migrate a volume per se, I have to do a lot of balancing, which is part of one of my next topics. But I have to do a lot of back-end pool balancing, and I have to know what host particular volumes are on, so that I can move them directly from one pool to another pool to help balance things out. And as an admin, I can't do that unless I go directly to the database or I write a separate tool.
I see. Yeah, I understand now.
This is a
So
little bit
in
different.
current state, only project admin get that host attribute if they say get volume, right?
So yes, if I actually do a Cinder show on a particular volume as an admin, I can see that
You
value.
can see.
But if I want to say as an admin, show me all of the volumes that are on a particular host, I can't do that
And
right now.
when project and can you specify that host to create volume also, or it's like automatically assigned by Cinder?
No,
Okay.
no, you can't do that as a creation. The best you can do is affinity or anti-affinity
I see.
to
So
another volume, but not a host.
But there's an important part here that I think we should stress out is that a project user should not be able to see the host. Because if I am assigned my own project, I can create volumes, I can do whatever, I don't care. I should not know about the infrastructure behind those volumes, which is the host information. So a
Correct.
project owner will, in Cinder, should not know about host. This is the next level.
Yes, correct. And that's basically the way it works kind of today, because you have admins and then everybody else, and everybody else can't see that information. But the distinction here is that as an admin, I can't even list the volumes based upon that attribute. And so there needs to be a mechanism built into the resource filtering that accounts for these different layers of access if we're going to do RBAC stuff. And like you said, that this is a brand new feature that doesn't exist today, but we need some way to, one, define it for each of the service levels or user levels, because they will be different for each of those levels. Like you said, like a project admin shouldn't be able to see the actual host back the entry on a particular volume. But a system level user or root level user can see it like they do now, but also list all the volumes that exist against a particular backend, which doesn't exist now.
And is that like host attribute is host name or host UID, or?
It's neither. It's basically which volume backend on which machine and which pool that triple value is tells Cinder where and who owns this particular volume, which driver that's running, and on which pool on the back end inside that driver that volume exists, so the driver can actually do things with it or not. So it's,
And depending on the configuration, it is the host name. The beginning is the
Yes.
actual host.
Yeah, so one thing, like in Nova, what we're doing, we saw the sanitized version of the host name or whatever, so that if as a project admin, I get that host information from get volume, I get some sanitized information like sanitized host name or sanitized host UID, so that I don't get the infrastructure information, but still I can use that in filtering or something, if that makes sense in Cinder.
Yeah, but I think there is a point beyond the security of exposing those host names. There is a second security. Is
Mm.
don't want to tell users or anybody how you are actually allocating things, because a volume type in Cinder may mean many different things. With the same volume type, I could be storing data in a good backend, in a bad backend. I could be grouping, I could be splitting, I could do 100 things depending as the system administrator what I want to do. If I start exposing, even if it's just the grouping with a different name or sanitize or anything, they could do things that maybe I don't want them to do. So we are always very careful about not, as much as possible, about not letting people know what we actually have behind the scene or where it is.
Yes, and I think that is some of the reasoning behind having the resource filters to begin with. Is as at an API, Cinder API level, we don't expose certain things, but unfortunately, it's a blanket for all users, even admins. So yes, please, Brian, add this to the list of things that would be nice to have as a deployer, as an administrator of Cinder. It would make it much easier and nicer for me to be able to say, hey, I can find all my volumes on this particular pool, which is on this back end, instead of spending my time writing tooling that does exactly the same thing.
Yeah, so I think this is a great point. Like we were only thinking about the APIs in terms of personas, but now we also have to think about attributes of a particular resource. We need to consider that case as well. Okay.
And we may even have, like Jed was saying, think of it as an attribute kind of thing. This attribute is accessible by this role, so that when you do a Cinder show, it is hidden or shown. In filters, the same thing. So we could make it happen to multiple things that update, show, list, filter, bunch of things, depending on the role, do a mapping of, or a hiding on whatever. But that could make it even better, probably.
Yes, and knowing a little bit about the API, a lot of this stuff is hard coded in there right now, whether you're an admin or not. So such as the admin metadata. That whole concept is, I guess, still works, but there's an admin, then there's a project admin, and then there's a system admin, and then which one of those gets access to those. We need a unified way to specify which of those attributes belong to which role.
Well, from my point of view, in Cinder, it's quite easy because everything that is admin in reality is for the system administrator. Nobody else should know about it. I don't care if you're a project admin. If you only must know about your project, you cannot know about the infrastructure, about the backend, about which is the level where all those fields come from. It's basically where you get all the insight of exactly data from your array and all that. So
Yeah, and that's the main goal of this new RBAC, isolating these kind of things. But our APIs are so mixed up with this information. It's becoming challenging.
Yeah, I think this would be great once we get all this in and worked out. I think it'll be fantastic for people like me that manage Cinder on a daily basis.
Okay.
Yeah, you will have to bring less code to the next release. Your custom code, you will be able to remove it.
Yeah, so I'm noting down this like host attribute things in for our RBAC discussion in TC and broader level also, because I'm sure this same thing will be in many other project APIs or maybe in Neutron. So we'll discuss with Brian also there.
I also am keeping a note of these things on the Etherpads if you want to refer to that for this. So, okay, yeah. Thanks, Jiman, for providing a community-wide perspective to the topic. If people don't have any further doubts regarding this, so I think I mentioned the action items for Brian to like we'll be updating the policy matrix that will consider the APIs, and we can see what we can do about the attributes. As we can see in this discussion, they are also important for certain resources. So I guess we can take a short break and we can return in maybe 15 minutes from now. So I need to check what exactly UTC it is.
Well, I think 15 minutes from now should be, or do you want to leave it in the Etherpad or something?
Sure, I will update the Etherpad with the UTC, but everyone attending here can return in 15 minutes.
Should be 3 UTC, I'm guessing. No, 15. Sorry. Yeah, never mind. 15 minutes.
Keep it simple.
Yeah, go ahead and stop the recording.
Yeah, I'll just stop the recording.
Yeah, I've forgotten to do that.